Hey everyone, this is Reshma from Edureka, and in today's session we'll be learning Python programming language. Thank you all the attendees for joining today's session. If you all can hear me properly, kindly drop me a quick confirmation on the chat window so that I can proceed. Okay, so Monica says yes, Jagriti says yes, so does Sarah and David. Okay, thank you guys. So let us start by looking at the agenda today. At first, we'll see what are scripting languages because Python is widely used as a scripting language more than a programming language. So let us understand that also first. Then we'll take a brief overview of Python. After that, I'll tell you how to install Python in your system and also an IDE for Python, which is known as the PyCharm. I'll also tell you how to install that. And after that, this is the most important part that we are going to focus on today, which is the Python fundamentals. And in the end, we'll see the opportunities that you can grab on after learning Python. We'll take a look at the Python job trends for that. So are you all clear with the agenda? Okay, so Ayushi says yes, and I've got a confirmation from the others as well. So let's begin. So let us first take a look at what are scripting languages. Well, scripting languages are something that supports scripts. Well, this is a pretty straightforward definition, but in order to understand scripting languages, we should first understand the difference between a script and a program. Well, a program is just a bunch of statements to execute a particular task. It is a block of statements together. And scripts are also used for the same purpose. It's only that you do not need any human operator to run it. If you want to automate something, you can use a script. Let me show you with an example. So here we have got 3 programs and I want to run all these programs one by one. I want to run program 1 first, and after the execution of program 1, then 2, and finally 3. Now, if I don't have a script and if I'm not working with a scripting language, and if I want to do this task, what I'll do is that I need a human operator for that. This person will first execute program 1, and after he's finished program 1, then he'll execute program 2 and program 3. But when I have got scripts, the benefit is that I do not need a human operator. I'll just write down the executional statement of program 1, 2, and 3, something like run program 1, run program 2, run program 3, according to the order that I want to run them. I'll just mention that in a script, and then I only need to just run that script, and after that the script will take care of the order, the execution of the task. So I'll run that script and it'll execute program 1 first, 2, and then 3. So the benefit of using scripts is that you do not need any human interference. You do not need to engage a person to do this kind of things. So you can just use it for any automation purpose to automate any of your tasks. You can use scripts for that. And Python is actually widely used as a scripting language. Well, there are other scripting languages as well. You can see it right here. You've got Perl, TCL, but Python is the one that has outshined amongst all its peers, and it is the most popular scripting language by now. Okay, so Monica has a question. She is asking, will we be learning how to write scripts in Python today? Well, not in this session, Monica, because the name of this session is Python Programming Language. So we're just going to focus on programming here, but scripting is also very similar because scripting is just a subset of the Python programming language. So if you learn programming first and then move on to scripting, so if you just learn programming first, then you move on to Python scripting, it'll be much easier for you. So I hope that you'll still be joining with us, even though we're not learning scripting. So Monica, are you okay with that? Okay, so Monica says yes. And another thing about Python is that it is interpreted rather than compiled. It means that it uses an interpreter that is used to check the lines of code one by one, line by line, not as a whole like a compiler. So any questions on that? Okay, so no questions, so we'll move on. And now view of Python. So Python is a high-level dynamic programming language. It's dynamic in nature. So it can accept user inputs during the runtime, work on that, and give you an output. So it's dynamic. And Python supports multiple programming paradigms, including object-oriented. It has got all the object-oriented programming features, starting from classes and objects, data encapsulation, data abstraction, then inheritance, and all of the features. You name it, Python has got all the OOPS features. It is also imperative in nature. Imperative program is something that uses direct commands, something like a shell program where you write just direct commands that can change the state of your program or change the state of your system. Just write a simple one-line command, do something. So that is imperative program, because in Python scripts you use something like that. You use direct commands also, and that's why it is also imperative in nature. And it also supports functional programming and procedural styles. Functional programming, something like where it works with different functions to execute a particular task, and procedural style, something like the language C, where it focuses on the flow of the program, about how the program, the kind of procedure it is adopting to carry out that task. So Python has got all the features of all these kind of programming languages. And Jagriti has a question. So she is asking that what is the difference between OOPS and procedural? So procedural is the C language that you might have heard, and C++ is an object-oriented programming language. The only difference is that C++, which is an object-oriented program, it has got the feature of classes and objects and other features that I was talking about, which is the data abstraction, encapsulation, and various others. So the main difference is that in object-oriented programming, every entity is represented as an object. With object-oriented programming, you can actually model the real-world problems, because when you define objects, every object has a behavior, a certain kind of, which you can define it by functions. So that is the main difference between object-oriented and procedural styles. In procedural style, you just work with a simple variable and simple functions and use flow control statements. But in object-oriented, you work with the objects. You define a class first, create an object, and we're going to do this in this tutorial as well, where I'll show you how to create Python objects and classes, so you'll understand that. But you can say that procedural is like a subset of an object-oriented programming language. It's just a modification or a new, let's say, a version that has got added features. So that is object-oriented, and procedural is the older version. So you can say that. So Jagriti, are you satisfied with the answer? Okay, so she says yes. It is very easy to learn. I'm very sure that at the end of this tutorial, you'll all agree with me that it is very easy to learn, because it's very simple, and if you are already familiar with other programming language like C or C++, Java, any of it, this is just going to be a piece of cake for you. And even though you have not worked with any other programming language and Python is your first one, it is still going to be easy for you. Do not worry about that. So it is easy to learn and provides dynamic typing. So by dynamic typing, it means that it is all about when type information is acquired during the compile time or the runtime. It means that the values of the variables are checked during the execution. And it is used by vast multitude of companies around the globe, and like you can see, these are the companies, and there are others as well that are using Python. So Dropbox, NASA, Yahoo, IBM, Google, Mozilla, YouTube, Facebook, everyone is using Python now. Okay, so David is asking, can you tell me some common applications of Python? Of course, sure. I'll tell you, like Google is using Python for extensive web searching, and NASA is using it for some kind of scientific programming tasks. So the applications are different, but most widely Python is used to write scripts to automate your infrastructure, and it is also very widely used for web development, like Google is using that. And you can use Python programming as well to develop some kind of applications and data analysis. It can actually do a lot of things. And you can actually incorporate Python with everything. You can use it for testing as well. You can use it with tools like Selenium. It can get incorporated with that also. So it has a very wide usage. Okay, so David says, cool. Okay, thank you, David, for asking that question. So any more questions on this? Okay, no questions. So now let us see the simplicity of Python. Well, first, it's a very highly readable language. Now, it's very simple. This is pretty much something that you write the logic that you just scratch down in your notebook. It's very similar to that. It is not very hard to understand it. It's like English and like very common shorthand pseudocode kind of thing. So you don't have to put much effort in writing the code as well. So it is not just because of the OOPS concept, because C++ is also an object-oriented programming language, but it is less readable than Python. Python is more highly readable. But yeah, I would agree with you in the point that since it is using classes and objects and we are modeling the real world problems with entities in here which are called objects, so it is making my program more readable and more manageable in a way, you can say that. So Aisha, have you got your answer? Okay, so she says yes. So, and then again, it has a very clean visual layout and less syntactic exceptions. So unlike other programming language like C or C++ where you have to put a semicolon after each of the statements and you have to worry about the starting parentheses and the ending parentheses and the syntax, because even like it is very case sensitive with single quotations, double quotations, you don't have to worry about that in Python. It is very simple. The syntax is the easiest syntax that I've ever seen in any kind of programming language. So you don't have to remember a lot of things. You can just start coding. It has very less syntactic exceptions. And then it has superior string manipulation. You can actually do a lot of things with the strings. You can play around with strings in a lot of ways. So I'll be showing you that as well later in this tutorial. And it provides you with elegant and dynamic typing. So I already told you what that is, and it is interpreted in nature. Like I told you, it uses an interpreter instead of a compiler, because since Python is widely used for scripting, it is more advisable to use an interpreter when you're using it for scripting rather than a compiler. And it is ideal for scripting and rapid application, and it's fit for many platforms. Like I was telling you, Python is used as a scripting language, it is used as a programming language, it is used for testing, and it is compatible with a lot of tools that we use nowadays. So this is how simple Python is, and these are all the features and add-ons that you can get when you're using Python. So any questions on this? Okay, no questions. So now let me tell you how to install Python. So if you want to install the latest version of Python, which is the 3.6.0, or even if you want to install the older version, just go to this website, which is www.python.org/downloads. Let me just take you there and show you. Okay, so this is the website. If you want to download, you can see that you can download the two versions. This is the older versions. People are still using it, but if you have started using Python just now, I would recommend that you download the latest version. There are a few differences between the two versions regarding some kind of syntax, but they're not very different. You can download any of this, but I would recommend that you download the latest version. So just go to this download tabs here, and if you have a Windows platform, if you have a Mac or any other platform, just choose it from here. Now I have a Windows, so I'll just click on this, and this will download an executable file for you. Just run that. So now I've already downloaded Python in my system, so I'm not going to go ahead and reinstall it. I'm sure that you guys are pretty smart enough, you can do it yourself. So I'm just showing you the source from where you can download. Let me tell you how to install PyCharm IDE. So just go to this website over here, which is the jetbrains.com/pycharm/download. Just click on there and you'll find this page, something like this, and you just download the community version, because we'll be working on that. And PyCharm is the most popular IDE that is used for programming in Python, that is used for Python programming. So we'll be using that. You can use any other IDE that you like, but today we'll be working on PyCharm. So if you want, you can download that. I think there aren't going to be any questions, so I'm just going to move forward. So now this is the part that you should be very attentive, because we're going to learn the most important things, the building blocks of Python, which is the Python fundamentals. And these following 5 fundamentals are the ones that you need to know in and out if you want to master Python. So at first we'll take a look at the data types, what kind of data types Python have. It has got numbers, strings, lists, tuples, dictionaries. We'll take a look at all of them. Then we'll take that how to define the flow control in Python, how to use different loops and statements like if, else, and then loops like for, while, and then some kind of other statements like continue, break. We'll learn all of that. Then we'll learn how to write functions in Python, how to define a function, how to call a function, what is a docstring in a function, how to return values from a function. We'll also learn file handling, how to read a file, write into it, modify it, and finally, this is the most important thing, which is we'll learn how to create a class in Python and how to create its objects and then use those objects to actually represent real life problems. So these are the 5 fundamental things that we're going to learn today. Okay, so Monica has a question. She is asking that why are we installing the PyCharm IDE? Because Monica, with PyCharm, it makes my code more manageable because if I'm writing a multiple code project, the PyCharm IDE will help me link those files together. And even though actually Python comes with its own default IDE, but if you're writing multi-code project, if you're working on a multi-code project, I would actually recommend you to use PyCharm IDE, and that is because it'll make your code and it'll make your project a little bit more manageable than the default Python IDE. So that's why you're using PyCharm for our own benefit, for our own ease of coding. So Monica, have you got your answer? Okay, so she says yes. So let's move on and understand all of this one by one. But before that, let us first understand the characteristics of the data types in Python. So these are the characteristics, and the first one is that you do not need to declare a variable if you want to use it. Unlike in other programming language like C, C++, Java, you always have to declare a variable first if you want to use it later in the program. In Python, you do not have to worry about that at all. You can just choose any kind of variable and start using it at any point of the program. And after that, it has got certain attributes to define it. And there are 2 kinds of attributes. The first one is mutable and the other one is immutable. So the mutable are the ones that can be altered and immutable are the ones that cannot be altered. And an example for a mutable attribute, the data type that contains a mutable attribute is list, and the data type that contain the immutable attribute are tuples. And we're going to learn about lists and tuples, so don't get nervous if you are not understanding what a list and tuples that I'm talking about. You'll understand that how attributes define them and how they can change it. Okay, so after that, an object type also determines the operation that it supports. For example, if you're working with numbers and let's say that you want to use the plus operation, what it will do is that it'll just sum up or just add up those 2 numbers. But if you're dealing with strings and you want to perform the same plus operation, it will not sum up the strings, it will just concatenate the strings. So you can say that the data types also differentiate on the same operations. It will determine that what a particular operation would do to a certain kind of data type. And okay, so David is asking, is this operator overloading? Yes, you can actually think of as an implicit operator overloading that is happening in Python. So, okay, David. So, and after that, Python, since I was telling you, Python actually supports all object-oriented programming features. Generally, everything in Python, every entity in Python is actually depicted as an object. So these are the characteristics of all the data types that we'll be learning now. So any questions on this? Okay, no questions. So let us take a look at the data types in Python. And the first one is the Boolean. Now you all know that Boolean are the data types that store values in terms of true or false. And it is same in Python. The Boolean stores values in terms of either true or false. Like you have an example here, if the number is divisible by 2, it is true, else it's false. So it's like that. And then numbers. Now Python supports primitive data types like integers, floats, and even fractions and complex number as well. Like you can see here, a equals to 5 is an integer data type, b is 7.3 which is float, and c is 2 plus 3j which is a complex number. So Python also supports that. And after that we have got strings, and strings are nothing but these are a sequence of characters. Now in order to write a string or define a string, you can use either single quotes or double quotes. You can use any of that. It is the same in Python. And after that we have got bytes and byte array, and these are nothing but these are just 1 byte of characters, and byte array is an array of 1 byte of multiple characters. So this is bytes and byte array. So Python also supports that. So let me just show you a very few examples of all this, how you can work with strings and numbers and booleans. Let me just go to PyCharm and show it to you one by one. Okay, so this is my PyCharm. So if you want to start a project, just click on new project here. Just create this project and open current window. Okay. So this is your project. So just right click here and let's create a new Python file. So since I'm going to show you data types, so I'm just going to name it data types. Click on OK. And this is my Python file, which is datatypes.py, and py is the extension of a Python file. So let me just show you Boolean first, how you can work with Boolean. And by the way, this is the way to write comments in Python. If you want to write a single line comment, you can use the hash for that. And if you want to write multi-line comments, just use 3 single quotations, and you can write any kind of comments like this, multi-line comments. So just start with 3 quotations, single quotes, and end it with 3 single quotes. So let me just start with that. So let's say that I have not explained you about list yet. So don't worry, I'm just using it to explain you Booleans, how it stores true or false values, tell you how to write list and how to do things with list. So don't worry about that yet. So it is just a list of values, okay, for now. So let's say that it contains, like, it's a list of 5 numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? Then I'm taking another variable, let's say y, and I'll just write a kind of condition here. Let's say 3 in num. And now I'll just print y. So if you run this, you'll see that since 3 is in the list, so it is showing true. So like Boolean only returns value in terms of true and false. So that is why it is showing true. And if it was false, let's say 6, and if you run it, you see it will return false. So these are Booleans in Python. Now let me just show you numbers now. Okay, so with numbers you can do all kind of operations that you do, like add, subtract, multiply, divide. You can do all of that, and these are the same operators. For adding you just use the plus, then for subtracting minus, for multiplication you use the asterisk, and for division you use the slash. But since you already know that, but there are a few more operators that you can use. You can use the power operator, or the operator that divides a number and just takes the whole number questioned. So I'll just show that to you. You are already familiar with addition, subtraction, and all of those. So let me just show you the ones that Python supports that is a little bit different from other programming languages. Now let's say that I want to find the value of 5 cube. So for that, so I'll just use this operator over here, which is the double asterisk. And if I want to print 5 cube, I'll use it like that. And there is one more operator that you can use in Python, and that is the one that gives you a whole question. So let me just show it to you. So 32 divided by 3. Okay, but before that, let me just comment this. Okay, so now if you would run it, you can see that 5 cube is 125, and 32 divided by 3 is something like 10.6 or something, but it will only return the whole number of it, which is 10. So these are the operators that you can also use in Python apart from the other operators. And after that, let me show you strings, and for that I'll just create a new Python file. So let's say that I have got a string which is string 1, and I'm just writing welcome. And then I've got another string and I'm just writing to Edureka. Now since I was telling you about adding strings, let us add these two strings. So we'll add these two strings and store it in string 3, and we'll just go ahead and print string 3. So just run it, and you can see that it has concatenated it. So the plus operator here is used for concatenating those two strings, and this is the whole string that string 3 contains is welcome to Edureka. And you can actually do a lot of things with that. Let's say that I just want to print the first 4 letters in this string, which is WELC. And if you want to do that, you have to know the index, and like any other array or any other strings in other programming language, it also starts with an index 0. So W is at index 0, E is at 1, L at 2, and C at 3. So I want to print it until index 3. So if I want to do that, I just have to mention the range. I want to print it from the index 0 to index 3, right? But in Python, you have to write a number just bigger than the index that you want to print. And this is a little bit like thing that is off about Python. It is a little bit strange, but I'm very sure that if you start like working with Python and if you're using Python very frequently, this won't be a problem for you to remember this. Now I'm writing 4 here. I want to print it till index 3, and I'll be mentioning 4 here because the last index that you mention here will not be printed. So just keep in mind when you are trying to print and working with indexes, okay? So now if you run it, you can see that it has printed the first 4 characters up till index 3. And let us do some more things with that. Let's say that, okay, let me just show you this. Let's say that I just want to print the last 5 characters, okay? So I'll just keep it like that. And if I run it, you can see it has printed the last 5 characters. And similarly, let's say that I want to print the whole string except for the last 5 characters. I want to print till welcome to Ed. And I want to just not include the last 5 characters Eureka. So if you want to do that, it's very similar to that. So just write -5 at the right hand side of the colon. So now if you run it, so you can see that the last 5 characters are not included here. So these are just a few things that you can do with strings. You can do a lot other things as well. You can, if you want to run loops with strings, you can do that as well, but we'll learn loops first and then I'll show you. So any questions, guys? Okay, no questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the other data types. So now we have got lists. Now lists are just a list of values, and you can say that it's simple, and a list is defined with the square brackets, and it can store any kind of values, integer, float, strings. It can be a list of any values. And tuples are also very similar to lists. The only difference is that once you have defined a tuple, you cannot change it. Okay, so Monica is asking, can we store different data types in one list? Yes, of course, we can store any kind of data type in one list. You can see the example here. It is storing an integer, like these are numbers here. 2.2 is a float and Python is a string. So we can store different kind of data types in one list. So you've got your answer, Monica? Okay, Monica says yes. And tuples are also same as lists. It is defined by parentheses and it can store any kind of data type values, only it cannot be changed once you have defined a tuple. And after that we have got sets. And you can say that sets and lists are same. They can be actually changed, but the only difference between sets and lists is that obviously when you define a set, you actually define it with curly braces, and in list you do it with square brackets. So this is the one difference, and the other difference is that in sets you only have got unique values. So if you see here, we've got the days of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we actually cannot have multiple Mondays in a set, whereas in list we can have multiple number of ones, that we can even have 3 Python strings over here, but in sets we have got only unique values. Okay, so Jagriti is asking, sets are mutable? Yes, Jagriti, sets are mutable. A list and sets, they are mutable, and tuples are immutable. So Jagriti, have you got your answer? Okay, so she says yes. And another data types are the dictionaries. Now dictionaries are also mutable data types, and it is also defined by curly brackets. So the dictionaries have got a key and a value to it, and it is represented with a colon in the middle. So in the left hand side we have got the key, and in the right hand side we write the value that maps to it. And all of these, the list, tuples, sets, and dictionaries, every entity is separated by a comma. So let me just show all of this to you one by one. Okay, so let me create another Python file, and I'll just say other data types, okay? So I'll just call it other data types. So let me show you what our list first, okay? So let me just say that I have a list called nights. Now, as I was telling you, everything is, a list is represented by square brackets. So I'll write the list, I'll mention all the items in my list inside my square brackets. And let's say I've got strings, the name of the nights. Let's say I've got Sir Jamie, and then I'm separating by comma. And let's say that I have got Sir Barriston. And let's say that I've got another one, Sir Roderick. So these are the items in my list. So if you want to find the length of your list, you can use a function. Now if you want to print the length of your list, you can use a function or a method which is known as the len. So let me just show it to you. You just use len and the name of your string, which is nights. So if you run it, you can see that I've got 3 items, and so that's why it's showing 3. Now let's say that you want to add more items in your list. Since lists are mutable, you can alter them, you can add more, you can delete from it. So let's say that I want to add something else, some other names in my list. So in order to do that, I will use a method which is known as append. And let's say that I want to add Lady Brienne. So now if you run it, and now let me just print my list, which is nights. So now if you run it, you can see that it is printing my list and Lady Brienne has been appended. Now the append function, what it does is that it appends it, whatever you add here, it will just include it at the end of the list. It will just append it into the list. Now let's say that you want to add something at a particular index. Let's say that I want to include something after Sir Jamie. I want to include some other name after Sir Jamie. Okay, so for that I'll use a different method, and that method is called the insert method. And here you have to mention the index first. So if I want to include something after Sir Jamie, that will be in index 1. So 1, then comma, and whatever you want to mention. Let's say I want to write Sir Podrick Payne. So now let me just write the print. So now if you just run it, you can see that Sir Podrick Payne has been added to the first index over here after Sir Jamie. So this is how you can add things in your list, okay? And there are other functions as well. You can reverse your list, you can sort your list in different ways. So there are methods that you can read about in Python. So I'm just showing you a few about inserting, and so I'm just showing you a few about inserting items into a list. So any questions on that? Okay, no questions. Okay, now let me show you tuples. Sorry. So let's say that I have got a tuple called houses. Now, since I told you that a tuple starts with a parentheses, so again I have, let me insert some kind of items over here. Got house Stark, then house Tyrell, and Lannister. So this is my tuple. Now I have defined my tuple first, and now it is immutable. It means that I cannot make changes to it. So you cannot actually append or add anything onto the list. So if you just, okay, now even if you try to actually append, let's say that if you using the same function, and let's say that I want to add one more item into it, and if you try to run it, you'll see that it is showing an attribute error. The tuple objects has no attribute append because it is immutable, and that's why you cannot make changes to it. So that how do I actually do it? How do I make changes into a tuple? Actually wonder that tuples are of no use. You can actually consider tuples as a constant, but you can also actually change the values in it. Let me show you how. So we've got houses as my tuple. So what I will do is that I will take a variable called house1, and I will just convert it into a list. And since I can make any changes in list, and what this will do is that it will just take all the items in houses, in the tuple houses, and it will make a list which is known as the house1. And since now house1 is a list that contains all the items in the tuple houses, you can actually make changes in house1 because it's a list, right? So let's add house Bolton in the list. So now I can use append, and I'm appending, say, Bolton. Now it will append Bolton at the end of this list, and if you want to convert it into a tuple again, we'll use the same method. So again, I'll use houses, and I'll mention the name of my list, and then let me just print it. So if I run it now, yeah, sorry, I forgot to comment this. Yeah, because obviously this won't work, right? And since it's an interpreter, you can actually see that it has encountered the first error, and an interpreter actually stops after encountering the first error. It won't check the other lines even though they are correct. So that's why you should be very careful with an interpreter. So make sure that you have cleared out all the errors that is at the beginning or at the end. So that's why it was showing error. And now let me actually run it. And so you can see that now it has been modified and house Bolton has been added. So this is how you can actually change tuples. So any questions on tuples or lists or anything? Okay, so no questions. So thank you guys. So let me just create a new Python file again, and let me now show you dictionaries. And since I was telling you like dictionaries are mapping, so it will have keys and values. So let me say, okay, so let's say that I have got a dictionary called Westeros, okay? And as you know that a dictionary actually is represented by a curly braces. So now we just have to write some keys and map values to it. So let's say that I have got my first key and it's the name of a person, Cersei, and after colon you just write the value it maps to. Let's say it maps to Lannister. And then let me just similarly add more items. Okay, so these are the keys. Cersei, Daenerys, and Sansa are my keys, and the values that it maps to respectively are Lannister, Targaryen, and Stark. Okay, so now let us say that you want to change a certain value of a particular key in a dictionary. So if you want to do that, you just have to write the name of your dictionary and the key, and then the name of the key, which in my case is Daenerys, and then you just write the name of the changed value. So let's say that now it's Dothraki. And let me just now print it. So if you run it and you see that now it has changed, the value mapping to the key Daenerys has been changed. So this is how you can modify your dictionary. And again, let's say that you just want to view the values or just the keys. Let me just show you how to just print just the keys in the dictionary to identify it. So these are the methods which are known as the keys and values in order to just list out the keys and values. So you can see that the keys are Cersei, Daenerys, Sansa, and the values are Lannister, Dothraki, Stark. Okay, so Jagrati is asking what happens if I print the key. It's just for your purpose, you know, if you're working with Python and let's say that you're managing index, okay, so and if you want to see just the names first of that particular index or something, this is actually useful when you're dealing with a huge amount of items in a particular dictionary, when you're mapping a lot of things together. It can be useful for you sometimes. In this case, we do not need it, obviously, but I'm just showing it to you. Okay, so Jagrati is asking something. She is asking what happens if I write print Westeros and then Cersei, what it will print. Okay, since you asked, let us see what it will print. Let me just show it to you. Okay. So make sure you write in quotations. Is that what you were asking, Jagrati? Oh yeah, yes. Okay, so let us just run it. Yeah, so when you do that, you get the values mapped to it. Okay? So yeah, Jagriti, I'm very glad to see that you are actually getting curious and you are actually wanting to know so what happens when we do this or that. So after installing a PyCharm in your system, please go ahead and try experimenting with lists and dictionaries, tuples, whatever you want to do, and you'll get your answers yourself. So I'm just showing you the basic methods and the basic operations that you can do, but you can do a lot more other things as well. So just keep that curiosity up and start playing with them, and you'll get all your answers. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to have fun playing around with dictionaries, lists, and tuples. So Jagriti, is there anything else that you want me to do or you want to ask? Okay, so thank you, Jagriti. So yeah, and since I didn't show you how to delete things or how to delete items, I'll also show you that as well now. If you want to delete some item, just use this keyword which is called del, okay? And the name of my dictionary, which is Westeros, and in square brackets just write the key value, just the key, okay? So let me say that I want to delete Sansa, okay? So let's say I want to delete Sansa. So I'll do that and then I'll just go ahead and print it. And let's see that whether it has been deleted or not. You can see that Sansa is deleted. So we have just got two items in my dictionary, Cersei and Daenerys. So this is how you can also delete things from your dictionaries. So any questions on that? Okay, no questions. Thank you guys. So we'll just go on with the next topic now. So now let us understand the flow control, how to define flow control in Python. So a flow control is the order in which a program code executes. So if you see the diagram right here, this is the start And so you can see this diamond shaped box, and this is where it actually checks for a condition. So let's say that if the condition is true, it will execute this particular task and then finally go to task 4. And if it is false, it will just go to task 2 first, then execute task 3 and task 4. So basically it's starting from the same position and ending at the same position, but the path that it follows could be different. So this is how you define the flow control. You define that how your program should move ahead according to a particular condition. And if you want to model real life problems, you have to use these kind of conditions. And the types of flow control are, if you use those if statements, we'll see how to use them. Then you can use loops like for or while. You can use other statements like break, continue, pass. So we'll be taking a look at all of this one by one. So is there any questions that you want to ask me about what is flow control and any kind of queries that you might have? Okay, no questions. So let us move ahead and let us see the if statement first. Now this if statement is also very similar to other programming language where you use if. So there are three kinds of if statements. The first one is the simple if. You only write if, the expression or the condition, and the statement that it should execute if the condition is true. And there is another one called if and else, that if you mention a condition and if it's true, it will execute the block of statements after that, and if it's false, it will execute a default statement after else. And there is another one which is the if else, that is very common in other language, and in Python it's called as the if elif else. Okay, so you can actually check multiple conditions or multiple expressions together with if elif, and at the end you just mention a default statement. If none of the conditions are true, it will just execute this statement that is after else, which is the default statement. Now if you also see this flow control, you will understand it again. So this is the test expression. So if it was false, it will just execute the statement that is below if. That means this will not get executed. Any other statement that is after that. So in this case, this is the else one. And if it's true, it will execute the body of F and then will move out and execute the statement below. So this is how you define flow control with if. So let me just show you a few examples, okay? So again, I'm creating a new Python file. I'll just simply name it if. So let's say that I have got a variable x equal to 20. Now if I'm just using the simple if statement, and I'm just going to check if x is greater than 28, and after writing that, you just mention a colon, and then you just write any statement that you want to. Let's say that I want to print like So I want to print it is greater than 28, okay? So make sure that you take extra care of the indentations, because we are not using parentheses in order to understand that what is the block of statements after if. So if you mess up with the indentations, it is going to be a problem for you, because if you write the print over here like this, it will not be treated as a statement that is under if. This will be a completely independent statement that will get executed after if anyhow. This won't be inside the body of if now. Make sure that you take extra care in the indentation, okay? This is a simple if statement, and if you want to include an else, which is the default statement, so just write anything. So now if you run it, so it will print this statement because this condition is clearly false because x is equal to 20. So this is how you check if else. Now if you want to check multiple conditions, so you can use the elif. So let's say that you want to check if x is greater than 10 and x is less than, say, 15. So I want to print something here. Or make sure that you don't miss the colon after every condition that you write, okay? and let us include some more conditions. So I'm just writing like simple print values like that. So this is a block of statements. So these are a few conditions that I have mentioned. So now if you just run it, so you can see that it is printing it is smaller than 28 because it is not satisfying any of these. X is definitely greater than 15, but it is not less than 20. So none of these conditions are getting satisfied. So that's why it is printing this last default statement. So, but okay, so let me just change the value so that it satisfied one of the conditions. So now if you just run it, so you can see that it lies between 10 to 15. So this condition gets satisfied, and that's why this print statement is getting executed. Okay, so this is how you use if, elif, else statements. Okay, so any questions on that? Okay, no questions, so we'll move on. Okay, so now let us understand a real life usage, or just try to model a real life problem with the if statement, okay? So let me give you an example of Facebook about how you actually log into Facebook, okay? So it'll ask for your email or phone, and it'll ask for your password, right? So it'll check if your password is correct or not. And if your password is wrong, it will show you something like this kind of page where they'll ask you if you forgot your password or something like that. And if your password is correct, so it will just log you in. Right, so this is a real life usage of if statement. So this is just a real life representation of an if statement. So moving ahead, now let us understand loops. So let me first tell you about the for loop. So now let us take a look at the for statement. So this for statement will help you in looping. So loops are nothing but a repeated execution of a block of statements, or a single statement you can say. And it is advisable to use a for statement or a for loop when you know the number of iterations that it should perform beforehand, okay? So you use a for statement when you know the range of the iterations. So use the for statement when you know the range of the iterations that you want to perform beforehand. So let me just explain you this flowchart over here. So this is the start, and this is the expression initialization, because you will have a control variable, a variable that will change its values throughout in the loop, okay? So this is where the condition will be tested. If the condition is true, only then the loop body will be executed, and if the condition is false, it will just execute the loop. And after executing the loop body, the expression would be updated and the condition would be tested again. And as long as the condition is true, the loop will keep getting executed, and once it is false, it will just move out of the loop. So this is the for loop, okay? Let me now just give you a real life for loop representation. So again, we're using the example of Facebook, and this is the Facebook profile of my very good friend Sandeep. So this is Sandeep's profile, and he has got quite a lot of friends. He has got 962 friends, and now he wants to list out the names of all his friends. So now I know beforehand that he has got 962 friends, so I need to run this loop 962 times, right? And so that is why I'll use a for loop in this case. So for friend list not equal to null, so it means that until there are names inside his friend loops, until it's not null, it will keep executing. So it will generate the HTML for friend list. So it will keep listing out all his friends until all his 962 friends are listed out. So this is a real life representation of the for loop. So let me just show you in PyCharm how the syntax of for loop and how you can use for loop in Python. So I'm going to create a new Python file. So I'm just going to name it for loop. So let's say that I want to print out all the numbers starting from 0 to 10. Okay, so let me just use variable. Let me just initialize it with 0 first, and then let me use the for loop. Okay, so I'm using the for, then I have to mention the range. I want to print it from 0 to 10, so I have to write 11 as my higher range because it won't print it, and after that I'm just printing X. So now if you just run it, you can see that it has printed from 0 to 10 all the numbers. So this is how you use for loop when you know the range. Okay, so you can also use it with list also if you want to print from any kind of list. If let's say you have mentioned a list of values here instead of a range. Okay, so let's say that you have got a list, so let me just mention a list of any random numbers. So now if you would just run this, so it'll just print out all the items in the list. So you can use a for loop for that also. It is just exactly the real life representation of Facebook friends that I just showed you. It has already got a list and it will just print out that. So for that you can use the for loop like this. Okay, so any doubts? Okay, no doubts. So let us move on now and let us take a look at the while statement. Now with a while statement you can also use loops like for, and a while statement is basically used when you do not know the number of iterations beforehand. You only have a condition and you don't know that how many iterations it will take until the condition is going to be true. So in that case you use a while statement instead of a for statement. Okay, so this is the difference between while and a for loop. If you just read it out, you can see that for loop is used when we know the number of iterations beforehand, and a while loop is used when we know the range of values but we do not know the exact number of iterations. So this is when you should use for, and this is when you should use while. Okay. Okay, so Monica is asking, can you give me an example? Of course, Monica, I'll give you an example for that. So I'll just first explain you the flowchart here and then I'll show you an example. So I've already shown you an example for loop where you know the number of iterations, like I was printing from 0 to 10 and I was listing out the numbers in a list. So I already know the number of iterations, and now I'll also give you an example of while statement. So just have patience for just a few minutes. Okay, Monica? So this is the flowchart of a while statement. So similar to a for statement, the test expression is validated first, and if it's true, the body of while loop will get executed, and after that it will check the test expression again, and if it's false, it will come out of the loop and it will execute the statements that is after the while loop, and the loop will keep continuing until the test expression is true. So this is very similar to the for one as well. So now let me give you an example, Monica. So again, with the same Facebook example that we're going on, so now Sandeep wants to view all the stories till the end of the page. Now here in this condition, we do not know when the end of the page will come in. We do not know how many stories are we going to view. Okay, so before that in for loop, we knew that how many friends we have to list out because we can see the number of friends in the list already, that he had got 962 friends. But now we do not know how many stories are there at the end of the page. Okay, so now I know the range but I don't know the number of iterations. Okay, so I know that I have to load 10 more stories into the news feed until the end of the page. So I want to load 10 more stories, so I'm just running the while loop, and here my test expression is that until the number of stories is equals to 10. Okay, so once 10 stories are completed, the while loop will stop running. So Monica, have you understood this example, and have you understood the difference between a for and while now? So Monica says yes. Thank you, Monica. So now let me just show you how to use a while loop in Python. Okay. So let me just go ahead and show you the while loop right here. For that, I'll just comment it. So let's say that again I have got a variable x with 1, let's say. So now what I'm actually going to do is that I am going to use random numbers. Okay, so and if you want to random numbers, you have to import some kind of module. So for random, you have to import this module, which is called random, because I'll be using some kind of functions that can be found in the random module. These are some kind of inbuilt functions that I'll be using. Okay, so that's why I'm importing random. So I've got a variable x equal to 1 now, and now I'm going to use the while statement, and I have to mention a test expression. Okay, so Jagriti is asking, why are you importing random? Can you repeat? Yeah, Jagriti, because I'll be using some inbuilt functions, because this example that I'm going to show you deals with random numbers. Okay, so I'm going to generate random numbers using a function that can be found in the random module. So I have to import that module if I want to use those inbuilt functions. Is that okay, Jagriti? Okay, so we're using while now. Okay, so now I have to mention test condition now. So let's say that I want the text expression to be when x is not equal to a particular number 23. And until then, this loop will keep on running, okay? So now this is the body of my while loop, and now I'm just going to print x. And now I also have to update the expression. So I'll update x, and I'm going to use a particular function which is called as the rand range, and where I can actually mention the range of the random numbers that I'm going to generate, and I'm going to mention that. So let's say that I just want it from 1 to 35. Okay, so my random numbers that will be generated will be in range 1 to 35, and that is why I have imported random, because I was going to use this function. Okay, and this is only available inside the random module. So this is my while loop, and so let's just go ahead and execute it. So you can see that it has generated a number of random digits and random numbers, and it has only stopped when 23 was encountered. That means that it was about to print 23, and that is when it means that x was assigned to 23 and it was about to print it, but since this condition became false, so that's why it came out of the loop. Okay, so this is the while loop. Any questions on while loop? Okay, so no questions. So this was while loop, and we have used while loop here because we're dealing with random numbers, and we do not know, we cannot say that beforehand that how many numbers it will print. So it has actually printed quite a number of digits in this range, so we cannot predict it beforehand, the number of iterations. So this is why we used a while loop here instead of for. Okay, so these are the situations where you can use while loop, and I have told you the other situations where you can use a for loop. Okay, so let us move on. Okay, so now let us understand the break statement. So when you're dealing with loop, you can use these kind of statements like break. So let's say that if you want to use conditions inside a loop, and if you want to do something, if this condition is satisfied, you can use break. Let me tell you what the break actually does. So this is the body of your loop entirely, and this is one test condition that is inside the loop. Okay, so if that test condition is false, it will keep on executing the loop, and once it is true, and if you have mentioned a break statement inside those after that test condition, it will break. It means that the loop will stop and it will get terminated. It will not run again once this condition has been satisfied. Okay, so this is the purpose of a break statement. So let me just give you a real life representation again of a break statement. Let us take the example of your alarm in your phone. So your alarm will keep on ringing from the start to the end. So we don't know the time duration. Maybe it can be for 2 minutes, 1 minute, or however time your alarm actually rings. So your alarm will keep on ringing until you snooze it or just turn it off. So it will keep on ringing. So now let's say that you get an incoming call while your alarm was ringing. So what will happen? Obviously your alarm will stop ringing and your phone will start ringing with the ringtone. So it's not like that it's going to ignore your incoming call and keep on ringing the alarm, right? So this is what happens. So it means that the loop of ringing the alarm gets braked, because this condition comes that if there is a call, it should stop ringing, right? So this is the purpose of a break statement. So any questions on break statement? Okay, so no questions. Well, I'll be showing you how to use break statements in Python as well. So for now, I'll just continue to the continue statement now. So a continue statement is also similar to a break statement, but it is a little bit different. Okay, so what happens when you encounter a continue inside a loop? So if you place a continue within the test condition, what it will do is that it will just stop the execution of loop only when this test condition is satisfied. It will just come out of the loop. It will just again return to the start of the loop and it will execute it again. This execution is only going to stop only a particular condition is getting satisfied. The execution of the loop is only going to be stopped when a particular condition is satisfied when you place a continue. So let me just actually show you the difference between a break and continue first. Let me create another Python file. Just say, so let's say that I have got a for loop. Okay, so let me first initialize a variable. Let's say x is equal to 40, and now I'm using the for loop again. Let's say for x. Now let me just include a certain kind of condition over here. So let's say that if x is equals to a particular number 45, it is going to break the loop. Okay, or else it will just keep on printing x. Okay, I forgot the colon over here. Then I also have to update the expression, which is I'm going to update it by 1. And now if you run it, you can see that it has only printed from 40 to 44. And since this condition was satisfied, the loop was broken. Okay, now if you see that if you use continue instead of break here, let us see what happens. Okay, so now if you run it, you can see that it has printed all the numbers except for 45 here. It means that whenever you use continue, only for that particular time when the condition is true and you use a continue, the loop is not going to get executed. But after that, once the condition is found false after the updation of your variable, it will again keep on continuing. So have you understood the difference between break and continue? Okay. So this was a break and continue statements that you can use inside a loop with conditions. So now there is another representation of the continue. So let's take the example of your phone again in order to understand the continue statement. So let's say that your phone has started ringing and it will keep on ringing until the person who has called you has disconnected it or it has been cut off automatically, okay? But let's say that while your phone was ringing, your alarm was scheduled at that time, in between the time when your phone was ringing, okay? So let's say that an alarm was scheduled in between the time when your phone was ringing, okay? So what will happen? It's not like your alarm will start ringing and it will disconnect your call, right? So your alarm will hold off. It will be on snooze automatically or implicitly until your call is over. Once it's over, your alarm will start ringing again. So this is continuous. So it will just hold off for a particular condition that is getting satisfied in this case, which is the ringing of your phone. And after that, it will start doing the same thing. So is it clear? Okay, so let us move on and understand the pass statement. Now, pass statement is actually very simple. There is nothing much to tell about the pass statement because a pass statement is nothing, it is just a placeholder. And by placeholder, I mean that if you want to do nothing, if a particular condition is getting satisfied, you just mention the pass here, okay? And you don't mention any kind of processes here because you don't want to make any changes when this particular condition is getting satisfied. You just place a pass there and it'll take care of it and nothing will happen and there will be no change or no process that will get executed. So it's just a placeholder. So if you can see in this example over here, so there are like 3 conditions mentioned. So if this condition is true, it will execute process 1. This condition is true, I don't want to do anything, so just I have mentioned pass here. And if this condition is true, it will execute process 3 or else the default one. So the pass can be helpful when you don't want to execute the default statement. So that's when you can use pass and it will do nothing. Because if otherwise you do not mention this condition, because you might be thinking that why should I use pass if I don't want to do if this condition is getting satisfied? I can just simply remove this condition, right? But what will happen is that if none of these conditions are getting satisfied, it will actually execute the default statement. And if you don't actually want to execute the default statement as well, so just write the condition and write pass, and it'll just hold off and will do nothing. So have you understood pass? Okay, so David has a question. So what is the purpose of pass? Why do we use it? So it's a very good question, David. So if you just take a look at this example over here, you can see that I have got three conditions and I've got the default condition, okay? So let's say that I have a situation. In this condition, you might ask me that if I don't want to use this condition, if this condition is getting satisfied and I don't want to execute anything, why to just write pass? I can simply remove this condition, right? You can think of it like that. But what happens is there when you're dealing with conditional statements like if and there is always a default condition. So if none of the conditions get satisfied, the default condition will execute some kind of process. Okay? So in that case, where you're not sure what to do or what process that you should run, or maybe you don't want any kind of change when a particular condition is getting satisfied, so then only mention pass, because after a particular condition, you have to mention some kind of process that will run, right? So if you don't want any kind of change, you can just mention pass. Okay, so this was all about a flow control. So now let us go ahead and understand how to write functions in Python. So functions are a block of statements that is used to perform a specific task. And it is very advisable to use functions in programming because with functions you can actually manage your code in a better way. So that's why you should use functions, and functions are always promoted. So this is an example of a function. Now, function in Python always starts with the keyword def and then the function name, and in parentheses you mention the arguments, okay? And you can see the triple double quotations over here. This is nothing but the docstring. And what you write in a docstring is just a description of the function. It is for your benefit so that you can understand what your function does and what is it going to be used for. Okay, for example, the docstring here says this function returns the absolute value of the number. Okay, so this is the docstring giving me the description of my function. So this is my function body inside where I have written my code. Which is if num is greater than equal to 0, return num, else return minus num. Now it is going to give me the absolute value, not in sign. So this is the logic that I have written. And then in order to call a function, I'll just write the name of the function and pass an argument. So I have passed minus 200. So this will get passed in here and it will execute this function. Okay. And if I want to find out the docstring of a particular function, I'll use this. The name of my function dot and double underscores doc, and then after that double underscores. Okay, so since I'm printing this, so this will return 200, the absolute value, and it is returning the docstring, which is that this function is returns the absolute value of the number. So this is okay, so Monica is asking why this double underscore. So this is just the syntax of how to print docstrings. This is the default syntax of Python, Monica. Now let us understand why to use functions. So functions help in code reusability. Now let us take this example over here. So if you see this example here, this is a program which is used to reverse a string. And let's say that I want to give another input, I want to reverse another string. So what will happen, what I need to do then is that I need to run that same program again. But if I use it as function, all I have to do is that I just have to call that function a couple of more times. I don't have to run this entire program again, right? Okay, so Sarah has a question. She's asking that can I use a function that is defined in a different program? Can I import it? Well, of course, Sarah, you can do that, but before that, you have to convert your code into a module, and After that, whatever functions that are defined inside that module, whatever functions that you have written inside the program which is converted into a module, you can import them. But make sure that at the beginning of the program, if you're trying to import some other functions from other modules, make sure that you mention or you import the name of the module. Like I did while I was explaining you the while statement, because I was using a particular function that was actually mentioned inside the random module, so I used import random, right? So this is how you can actually use different functions from a different program or modules. So is that okay, Sarah? Okay, fine. So these are the uses of function. It actually provides you with a good organization of your code. It provides with abstraction. It means that you do not have to write that whole code again. You do not have to show everything. You can actually implement data hiding with use of functions as well. It also helps in extensibility, because if you want to add some new features to this program, you can just add it inside the function. You can add more lines or more features into it. So these are the uses of functions. So any doubts in that? Okay, no doubt. So okay, so let me just go ahead and show you how you can write functions in Python. Okay, so I'm going to create a new Python file. I'm going to write let us create a simple function that is going to add numbers, okay? So as I told you, a function starts with def keyword. So I'm just going to say the name of my function is going to be add number. Okay, and it is just going to add two numbers, so it is going to accept two arguments. So let's call it num1 and num2. And now you can just write the logic inside the body of function where sum is equal to num1 plus num2, and just return the sum, right? And yeah, of course, mention the doc string over here and the colon after that. So two numbers. Now how are you going to call this function? So let me just directly print the answer. So just type in the name, which is, this is my function name, right? Add number. So I'm just passing two values, let's say 20 and 30. And now if you run it, it is just going to give me the answer. And so this is how you write a simple function. You can write any kind of function. You just write all the code inside the function body and make sure of the indentation is correct. Now let me just go ahead and also show you how to print the doc string that I was just telling you about. So again, add number. Do you remember? It is double underscore doc and then again double underscore. So this is the doc string over here. So this is how you write functions. So any questions on functions? Okay, no questions. So now let us go ahead and understand file handling. How to read a file, how to write a file, how to edit those files and make modifications, okay? So the steps in order to read or write a file, first thing you need to do is you need to open the file. And after that only you can either read or write the file. And after you're done making the modifications or reading it, you have to go ahead and close the file. So these are the steps, and this is how you can perform file handling. Okay? So in order to open a file, Python has got an inbuilt function which is called open. Okay? So this is the function open. You just mention the path of your file. You just mention the path of your file and it will open your file. Okay? And similarly, in order to write a file, all you have to do again is if you want to read or write, reading the file, then just mention an R here. If you want to write the file, is the W, and make sure that you mention the encoding, and the default encoding is UTF-8, so make sure that you mention that. And then after that, if you want to write something, use the write function. This is also an inbuilt function, and this is my first file, and this is file contains 3 lines. So this is how you write into a file, okay? But there is one thing that you should keep in mind, that if you write a file, it will erase whatever it had previously and it will rewrite the file actually. But let's say that if you want to add something else into the file, so for that use append. So instead of W here, to append something, you can use an A over here, okay? So this is how you write in a file. And similarly, if you want to read a file, so like I told you, instead of W, just mention an R here, and you can use the function read over here. You can also mention the length that you want to read, or the length of the lines that you want to list out. So if you just want to list out the first 4 characters, it will do that. And after that, if you again read out 4 characters, it will start from the point where it ended, where your cursor actually ended. So this is how you can actually read from a file. And this is how you can read from a file. I'll show that to you how to do that. Don't worry if you're not understanding it now. And finally, after you're done reading, writing, you make sure that you close the file. And closing is very simple. It is again using an inbuilt function called close. So just use that function and that is it. So let me just now show you how to do that. Okay. So create another file which is called files. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is that I need to open my file, right? So I have a file, I have a text file somewhere in C drive, so I'm just going to mention that. So I have to use a variable, okay? And if I want to open, if I want to read or write, if I want to do anything, I have to use a variable for that. So I'm just using F here. So now I'm using the function open, and I have to mention, so it's in my C drive, I have to mention the path. So I have to mention the path, and the name of my file is ray1. It's a text file, and after a comma, make sure that what do you want it for? Do you want it for writing, reading? So let's say that I want to write into the file. So I'll use a W and then mention the encoding, which is by default UTF-8. So this will open my file, and let's say that I want to write something. So for that, I'll use the write function and just write whatever you want to. So again, I'm going to write welcome to Edureka. And after you're done writing it, so just make sure that you close it, okay? And it's done. So you just run it now, and it is showing that process is finished. It means that it has successfully run. So now let us read it, okay? So for reading, I have to do the same thing again. I have to open it again. Okay, so this was for write. Okay, so now let me write something for reading it. Okay, so I'll just go ahead. So I just have to actually change this over here. Instead of W, I just have to write R that I want to open the file for. I want to open it for reading mode, okay? So, but before that, let me just go ahead and comment this so that they don't interfere when I run it. So now let me just read it. Like I told you that you can mention the length with this function. Let's say that 6, okay? And then finally, and if you want to print it, let's say print it, so let's store it in any kind of variable. Let me just call it text, okay? If I want to just print it, so I'll just go ahead and I'll print text, and make sure that you close it, right? So if you run it now, you can see that it has, I've mentioned the length that I want to read 6 characters, so it has just given me 6 characters. Now let's say that I want to read the entire file, whatever there is. So, and I don't know the length of it, okay? So for that, I'll use a function, inbuilt function again, which is called read lines, and just leave it empty. So now if you run it, it will print the entire string or the entire file, whatever there is written in it. So this is how you read a file, open a file, and write into it or read it. So is that clear to you guys? Any questions on file handling? Okay, no questions. Thank you guys. Okay, so now let us go ahead and understand object and classes. Now Python is an object-oriented programming language, like I was telling you. So it deals with classes and objects. So what are classes and what are objects? So you can think of an object. So if you refer to this example over here, you can think of class as a blueprint. And this is a blueprint of a house. And you can think of the houses that are created from that blueprint as objects. Okay? And you can say that these houses, and since this is the same blueprint, so the houses that are going to be created from this blueprint are all going to be similar. So like that, all the objects of a same class are also similar. And objects are nothing but they are just a collection of data which are variables, and there are also functions. And these variables and functions are what define an object, okay? And you mention all these variables and these functions inside a class from where the object is going to be generated. So objects are basically instances of the class. Okay, so Monica has a very interesting question. She is asking that in int equal to 10, can we consider int as a class and 10 as an object? Obviously, this can be a good example, but it's going to get confusing if you think of examples like this, but yeah, you can think of that like that. Well, Monica, it can get confusing if you start thinking of examples like that, but I can tell you that you are actually correct. You are getting the concept right. It's a blueprint. Int is just a definition of something, and an example of that is an object. So you are right in a way. So this is just a brief idea about object and classes, and objects are used to model real life problems because objects are also have got a certain behavior like real life objects, and those behaviors are defined by the functions and variables of the class from where the object is generated or created. So any more questions on this? Okay, no questions. Let us go ahead and learn more about object and classes, okay? So how do we define a class in Python? So you have to define it by using this keyword known as class. And after that, just write the name of your class, which is in this case is my new class. And you can write the body, or you can mention the variables or anything after that. And this is the body of your class, and this is the docstring. So the docstring is the same thing that we learned in functions. It is a brief description of the class, whatever your class is meant for using, whatever your objects will do, or the kind of data that, or the kind of functions that your class contains. So you can write anything that you want to, okay? And how to create an object for the class? All you have to do is write the name of the object and equals to the name of the class. So it's simple as that. So let me just go ahead and show you in PyCharm how to define a class and how to create objects. So let's say that the name of my class is called example. Okay, and I'm just going to write a very simple class. It has, let's say, a variable, let's say x is equal to 20 and another one y is equal to 10. And then it has also got a member function. Let me just name it function or func. And I'm using self over here. It means that the argument, whatever will be passed, it will get only passed from the object that will be created from this class, from the same class that an object will be created. Okay, so this is just going to point to itself. It is very similar to the this pointer that you work on with in C++ and C. And let's say that it's just going to print any kind of random things, like say I am in. So let's say that this is your entire class. Okay, so now if you want to create objects from this class, so let's say that I'm creating my first object. Let's say it's ob1, and all you have to do is write the name of your class, which is example. Yeah. And similarly, let me create another object. You can create as many objects that you want to. And the one thing that you should know that you can only access this variables and these functions only with the objects. Okay, you cannot actually go ahead and let's say print X. It won't work. So let me just give you an example and show you. So you see the name X is not defined because this is defined inside the class, okay? But instead of just printing X, if I use the object and then the dot operator, and now if you run it, it is going to show 20. So the objects are the ways or the keys in order to access the variables and the functions that you use inside a class, okay? Well, you can also define constructors in Python like how you do in C++. So constructors are nothing, but they are also member functions that get implicitly executed when you create an instance of the class or you create an object of the class. So let me just go ahead and show you how to write constructors, okay? So let me just include the constructor over here. Now, since constructor is a function again, so I have to start it with the keyword def, like how I write normal functions, okay? So since it's a constructor, you have to write it like this: double underscore, then init, again double underscore, and self. So I'm passing self here because my object that is going to get created, that is going to be passed as a reference or as an argument. Okay, so whatever object that I'll be creating over here, this will get passed as an argument here. So now let me just initialize those values. Let's say X is 45 and self.y is 60. So even though I have written these values somewhat different, what this function is going to do is that this is going to get executed and this will initialize my variables, or this will give new values to the variables once my object is created, okay? So now let us go ahead and actually print these values. Now let's see what does it print, okay? So you can see that now it is showing 45 and 60 instead of 20 and 10. It is because when I created this object, this function got automatically executed and it has actually changed the value of X into 45 and Y to 60. So the constructor is used to initialize your object or initialize the variables in your class. So that is the purpose of a constructor, and this is run implicitly. You do not need to run this explicitly. It will get triggered once you create an object of your class. So this was about classes and objects. Any questions on this one? Okay, no questions. So now let us take a look at the Python job trends. So this is a trend graph that has been collected from Indeed.com, and this is the data from 2012 to the end of 2016, and this blue line over here represents Python, and you can see that the job trends are people who know Python are grabbing onto more opportunities. They are getting more opportunities since Python is trending, and obviously it will, since you have seen that how much you can do with Python. It is very easy and you can actually do a lot of things with Python, and that is the reason that it is trending more than the other scripting languages like Perl, PHP, Ruby, and Django. So you can see from this graph that Python is really trending and it is very popular. So you can conclude from the graph is that Python is the clear winner here. Nothing is even close to that. So it is very trending and it is right now in the top charts. Now, since a lot of people are using Python, let us take a look at the success stories. Now there's Google, Facebook, Instagram, Mozilla. Now Google is saying that Python has been an important part of Google since the beginning, and the director of Google, Peter Norvig, says that Python has been an important part of Google since the beginning and remains so as the system grows and evolves. Today dozens of Google engineers use Python and we're looking for more people with skills in this language. And so this is what Facebook has got to say, and Instagram and Mozilla, and I'm pretty sure that not just these four, there are other big companies as well that are using Python and are still using it because they have acquired huge benefits by using Python. So this is a few of the success stories of Python. And this is what we learned today. We have understood what are scripting languages and what are they used for. We took a brief overview of Python, about the features of Python. We learned how to install Python and PyCharm in our system. We understood the Python fundamentals, the things that we need to know in and out if we want to master Python. We have seen the job trends and the success stories. So this is the end of today's tutorial. If you have any questions till now, you can still ask me. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay, no questions. So thank you for joining today's session. If you have any questions that you want to ask, you can leave it on the comment section below. So thank you guys for attending this session. I'll see you next time. Till then, happy learning. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!